Oh boy, howdy, I'm live. How y'all doing, everybody? It's been swell signing in again, and I just, for no reason whatsoever, decided to do a live stream. One of my days off from work, and I think I'm in a decent enough time to actually do this without having to worry about going to sleep. I haven't really been uploading anything if I go and check. Life's gotten in the way, might have to move soon, all that kind of stuff. New Year's resolutions, haven't really made a few. But, I'm still working on it. But whatever, you're not here to listen to me drawl on about my boring and innocuous life. You're here to get to the meat and potatoes of everything. That being, yeah, as the title says, we're going to go and critique a little story called Dating Game. Now, for those of you who are not in the know and don't know what I'm referring to, Dating Game is a story that at some time ago me and the back creepypasta crew I think critiqued it, and and me and the Overanalyst together critiqued it on his channel. You can go and probably find it. It's probably still up there. Um, and I, in hindsight, am somewhat dissatisfied with my input in that video because I spent a lot of time this was pasta of the month. I just realized. Wow. Um, I spent too much time moralizing, and I think we got a little too worked up over something that really was innocuous and didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But I'm coming here now to try to give this a fair shake and actually try to be constructive in my input. I might, if you've seen the video that I'm referring to where I've critiqued it, I probably might put, I'll put in the description sometime later. Uh, it's not a surprise to me if it won't come as a surprise rather if I end up repeating some of what I said just in a more even-headed tone because really my initial passion, I suppose you can call it, for creepypasta has waned to the degree that nothing really gets me hotter than the collar anymore unless it's like weird interpersonal shit like with people like fucking what's his name Mr. Creepypasta and his ilk and the kind of the shenanigans they got up to and their little circle of the internet. But that has less to do with the creepypasta community and more to do with their general behavior and how I feel that they kind of get off basically on their fame. But that's a topic for another day. We basically covered that before. So this is Dating Game. I don't know who wrote this. This was, as I said, right here, pasta of the month, and right here, they're here, mental illness. I don't even know how that works, but I'm gonna start from the beginning, as all stories tend to start. I've been single for a while, and I was sick and tired of it. Being 32 and single is no laughing matter. The traumatic experiences of watching your friends get married. Oh, that's loud. Get married, have children, obtain the American dream are akin to the hopeless depression of the schizophrenic mental patient. I wanted a wife, I wanted kids, I wanted a steady job. I was tired of working at Burger King and living alone in a studio apartment. And I was almost certain I memorized 90% of porn stars on the internet by name. Disgusted by the company in my left hand, I decided to go out in one of those speed dating events. So we're starting things off strong. This is basically an incel. It's funny because I don't know what the intention is. I'm assuming that's the intent. This guy is, and then he's an incel. I think that's what the creator was going for. I will keep those jokes to a minimum because, well, I'll be honest with you, incel jokes are a dime a dozen, and that's the lowest of low hanging fruit, especially for a story with this kind of tone and the kind of character that's written here. Well, we'll get into that as we go on. I picked up my best garb and walked out the door. Keep in mind, I worked at Burger King, so the best clothes I could afford were some mediocre dress shirts and tattered tacky pants. I bought at Walmart. I bought at Walmart during a clearance event. I walked into the event, trying to display the shred of confidence I had left. I was left instantly discouraged when I saw all the other competing mates in their Armani suits and high-class whiskey in hand, their auras reeking of nothing but pure self-esteem and conceit. Okay, that's kind of a contradiction, isn't it? Uh, I don't know, like, if you can afford an Armani suit and you have all this, like, you radiate self confidence and you got a whiskey in hand, like, what are you doing at a speed dating event? Like, you seem like someone who could have no problem slaying pussy as is. Oh, by the way, this isn't a stream for children, because I feel the need to specify because YouTube, for some reason or another, is run by mentally disabled people who don't know how the world works and aren't very good at business, apparently. Oh, they're richer than me. Whatever. The ladies there were dressed in fine dresses, some of which were quite low cut and smelled like a flower garden designed by Martha Stewart herself. There was some serious lookers there, and I swear my pants shrunk a couple sizes that at the sight of some of these dresses. Speed dating. I want to get into it, but there's something about the character that I think that's actually has some level of missed potential. Because whenever I critique stories, I always kind of try to put myself in the mind of the person who wrote the story, and to try to discern what their initial intentions were. And I think I have a decent enough understanding of to what they were going for, but again, we'll get. I kind of keep skipping ahead. I think that it could have really been done better, as we'll see. Um, the speed dating started. The first girl I sat down was quite young, a 22-year-old mother of three. She had made a lot of mistakes in her life and seen far more than I could handle. Right off the bat, she told me about how she was 4 days sober from methamphetamine, and she was looking to settle down with a nice man who didn't look like a walrus. A walrus, sorry. I spent the next 4 minutes making general small talk, quite literally fearing for my life. Once that buzzer sounded, I rocketed out of my chair with the speed of gazelle. The young woman seemed offended, but honestly, what does she expect? 4 years sober from methamphetamine, you wouldn't be stable enough or put together enough to attend a speed dating event. At least that's where I see it. I would say the next woman was way too old for me. I thought these kind of events were age regulated, and I had a different meaning for people with different stages of life. I'm no pervert, but the whole idea of taking her t-shirt off and seeing two runny eggs nailed to the wall did not appease me. My decision was finalized as soon as she brought up her grandkids. I can hardly handle one generation of young ones, much less two. I actually asked her if she needed help out of her chair when the buzzer sounded. Again, another dark look. I was betting 0 for 2, but such pitchers were the ones I could gladly let the catcher have. That metaphor doesn't quite work. Also, this line and the last line about the methamphetamine chick, the meth whore, made me kind of question whether or not this was supposed to be a dark comedic story. I mean, if that was the case, then because everything about this seems so over the top and hyperbolic. Well, with the initial comment made at the beginning of the story, with him saying shit like, "Oh, well, I never got pussy before, and it's horrible. It's worse than being like mentally unsound." Like, and then there was the comment of like he's making a comment about like he has pitching a boner, seeing all these ladies in their shortcut dresses, and while at the same time saying he's not a pervert, and then he's like insulting these two people and making these kind of cracks. Like, the only problem with this, with my theory or my initial belief that this is a horror comedy, is that the later what happens much later in the story is such a drastic shift. It's not really even a shift in tone. It's a dramatic divergence from what's been initially established, and it's not done in a way where it's clear that that was the intention. It comes off as someone who didn't know what they were writing, and it kind of just doesn't mesh well with what the tone that he is building right now. Because if the entire story was like this, I probably would even like it, to be honest with you. But that's not going to be the case. The next woman seemed much more appealing. She was 26 and studying to become a nurse at a local hospital. She loved kids, but had none of her own, which was a relief to me. She seemed well and stable, and wasn't a bad looker either. No lie, my eyes did wander herself a couple of times during the meeting. She either didn't notice or didn't care, as she never pointed it out. I asked her if she liked my number as the session ended, and she consented. I flipped open my phone and entered her phone number as she read it out. Smiling at her, I thanking her for her listening ear. No wonder I've been single for so long. I got up to the next table. While doing so, I closed my phone by accident and realized I forgot never saved a number, so it was lost forever. For the love of 0 for 3. The next table was empty. What a joke. If I wanted to sit there stare at a wall, I would have stayed home. Nothing is really to say here. Moving on. Okay, oh no. I'm being attacked by SCP, whatever it was. Sorry, I got the, I got the fucking Kevin MacLeod soundtrack playing in the background, or Kevin MacLeod spooky music in the background. And I keep, like, getting distracted because, like, oh, it's songs from the SCP game that no one cares about anymore. She was 23 and currently employed. She was married to a husband before. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, what was I saying? I was saying before. The shift in. Cause I know Jacob had a running gag with the change in what was it? Present to past tense. Like this guy's speaking in the past tense at the beginning, and now he's speaking in the present tense, and I don't know. Like it's a pet peeve of both of ours, but I just felt the need to point it out for the sake of just pointing, whatever. In the grand scheme of things, that's not the worst thing that this story will have done. This is where the story begins getting dark. The woman I met in the next table was the most interesting of all, but not in a bad way. She had long, flowing dark hair and green eyes. She had this cute smile, and man, what a tight body on this one. Black dress, black shoes, black everything. For someone dressed in such a gothic manner, she had such a bubbly personality. Everything I said made her giggle, and I felt like a king just talking to this girl. A girl who laughs too much on the first date is a warning sign to me. I don't know. A good sense of humor is one thing, but no sense of humor is awful. And you can have no sense of humor on both sides. Also, now I think about it, I don't know, I'm just imagining like the fucking Joaquin Phoenix Joker where, well, laughing at inappropriate times and can't really control it. He was 27 and currently unemployed. He was married to a husband before, but he had left her for her two children after her two children died of leukemia. She told me that the cancer was entwined with her lineage, dating back to as far as the 18th century. Therefore, in numerous fits of emotional rage, her ex-husband blamed her for giving the children cancer and left. Too pained by the loss of her entire family, she moved to the city a few weeks ago, living on unemployment, unable to continue her job due to crippling depression and panic she suffered as a result of her abandonment. Despite the torment in her life, she never seemed depressed about it. Either she was incredibly optimistic about life, or she was one of the best actors I had ever seen. Either way, I was willing to take a shot. I asked her if she would take my number. Turned out that she had had some bad meetings at this particular convention herself and wanted to take off to do something more fun. She tossed me an invite, seeing as I was a lonely 32-year-old virgin with rage. She didn't have to ask twice. I never understood what she saw in me all over all the other guys. I was beaten and broken with no aspirations to better my current situation. Maybe she understood how I felt, considering that all the pain she felt herself and decided to get to know who I really was under this cocoon of emotionless insecurity. Like again, like this line right here, like this still leans credence to the idea that maybe this guy wanted to make a comedy, like a horror comedy, like some weird dark comedy, and he changed his mind at the last minute or some shit, because everything that we set up, or that's been set up, that this guy is basically like he's a pervert who's kind of in denial and about being a pervert. He kind of thinks highly of himself. He kind of looks down on other people for their whatever situation they're going through. Uh, and then you hear this shit where he's like comparing being a virgin with rage over fucking this lady's kids dying of leukemia and having depression and all this shit and being like jobless. And then he said like, oh well, she's trying to get to know the real me under this cocoon of emotionless insecurity. Like it seems like this was being set up to where we're supposed to be wanting him to take a huge fall because of his hubris or his woe is me kind of victim complex. And I don't know, like it kind of as we see as we go on. Again, I keep skipping ahead. I don't think that if you were gonna go from that approach, they did everything wrong, or whomever wrote this did everything wrong. I sense a thread of compassion intertwined between all the stress and trauma, willing to lend an ear to anyone who felt the same pain as her. I was truly transfixed by her presence, drawn to her character. I had never felt like this before. Also, show don't tell. I would like to actually see change of dialogue where we can actually get to know the character instead of you telling us how it was. That's another thing that kind of weird, like perplexes me about the story is the choice to essentially like regurgitate all of this stuff to us instead of having us like read it firsthand. We decided to go to a pool hall. Apparently, she used to be a regular at another pool hall by her house, winning local tournaments and making a name for herself. She wanted to check out the scenery here. I wasn't too shabby at the table game myself, so I was excited. Every shot she made was perfect. The balls just sank into the pockets like each pocket was a black hole waiting for something to transpass its field. Out of 17 games played, I think I made about 23 shots. She kept running the table. It was funny because she kept apologizing for being so good. I waved the I weaved the we I waved the apology. Weaved. I waved the apology and a compliment on her skill. Okay, oh, welcome Quilted Live and Bean Daddy Mandela. Hello, sweet Bean Daddy. Okay, where were we? She said she had to go home and run some errands. Okay, where was I? Oh no, I missed the best part. And to be honest, I was always excited when the cue ball landed on my side of the table. You know, 'cause she bent over to take her shots, as many pros do. uh, we left after that. She said that she had to get home as she had some errands to run, and being new to the neighborhood and all. Oh, sorry, being new to the neighborhood and all. Uh, I agreed since I said I had a Facebook application that I had to update. Obviously, I didn't give her that reason. Jesus, what the hell's wrong with me? Passing up an amazing girl for Facebook? Ugh. So we exchange. Yeah, why don't you be a real alpha male and exchange it for passing up a woman for Tumblr, so you can read some dank memes, dank Steven Universe memes, buddy. Yeah, I already made that. Yeah, I already talked about that. I read this with the overanalyst. I'm not happy with my take on that initially, so I wanted to try to approach this in more kind of calm and at least in my attempt to be more analytical than I was originally. Uh, so we exchanged numbers to part ways. I couldn't believe it. I had actually escorted a beautiful woman. Hell yeah! Weeks and months moved on. We continued to talk and eventually began regularly dating. The relationship moved pretty quickly, and it seemed that we were truly matched for each other. After a few months of dating, I asked her to marry me. That's a terrible idea. I popped the question on the 17th, as that's how many games we played on our first date. She felt that's so romantic. She flew into my arms, screaming yes to the skies. Things were finally looking up. I moved out of my shitbox apartment and into her home. I always admire the cozy feel of her two-bedroom ranch house. Okay, this lady had to leave her job because she was so had crippling depression from all the shit that was happening in her life, but she could still afford her fucking a two-bedroom ranch house. Are you fucking serious? Something perfect to start a family in. As I was moving my final things in, I noticed how much of a mess I was making. Excuse me, my hot tea is still right here and still hot. Let me just take a sip. It is raspberry tea with a peppermint in it. As that's how many get. Okay, where were I noticed how much of a mess I was making with my boxes of stuff and all. I apologized and motioned to the basement to finish moving my things. Her face instantly darted to mine. In a hurried and almost frantic voice, she assured me that she'd take care of the rest of my things and I should relax. It was a bit odd, sure, but She had been through so much excruciating sadness throughout her life that having a psychiatric illness is something I expected. I complied to her request. That's a weird train of thought in that thing. Okay, she didn't want me to go down to the basement. Her life sucks, so I didn't question her. No, not even that. I was gonna go in the basement. She said she would take care of it. She didn't want me to go in the basement, and her life sucked. So she's meant that her shitty life means she's mentally ill. So I can't question what she says to me. It's fucking I don't know. The next few months were great. We never got shy of each other, and on our wedding day, we kiss. On the kiss we shared at the altar was so special that he firmly believes this. He's got the documents. He's got this proven. He has this set in stone. So don't you try to come to him with any evidence to the contrary, because he's not having it. Okay. Okay, he wants your beliefs out of his general vicinity. He firmly believes that an angel surrounded them and serenaded them with harps and trumpets as their lips connected and sparked so brightly that the entire room was illuminated. I'll leave out the details of the honeymoon. This is not a pornographic piece. Come on, guys. Uh, hmm. See, I want to make certain jokes. I want to make a joke about how in all the ways they sucked and fucked and all that shit. But I'm a mature adult, and I would never indulge in such juvenile behavior. I'll leave out the details of her. Okay, but she was always leery of me approaching the unforeboding basement. Sometimes, shouldn't it be foreboding or the unforbidding? Shouldn't it be foreboding? In a unforbidding or whatever, and sometimes to the point of arguing me about it. But aside from that, I didn't see any fault in her until everything I knew about life was shattered. One day, she told me she was going to the grocery store. I noted that I was going to I wanted some ground beef in order to make hamburgers for dinner. She smiled at me with that cute, adorable smile that I have grown to know and love, and headed out. After climbing Burger King's corporate ladder, I finally attained the position of regional financial manager for the entire state. I was working on some budget information. Well, yeah, knowing that what we know about fucking Burger King right now, you fucking didn't do a very good job, homie. They're not. Yeah, they're so desperate they fucking crush together dog food to fucking make vegetarian burgers to appeal to all 6 people who would even eat there. Whatever, man. You do you. It was an arduous, it was a long and arduous process, but finally giving about 6 figures for it, so I wasn't complaining. After each report was completed and evaluated, I almost read that as eviscerated. I moved the files into the USB drive so I could upload them to my computer for a corporate meeting the next day. To my horror, with only 3 reports left to finish, my computer crashed. If I didn't finish these reports, I would surely lose my job. I called my wife asking if she had another computer or something I could use, but she didn't answer. I rummaged through the house to find anything to set up to finish these reports, to no avail. Desperate times call for desperate measures, so I took the daring risk of approaching the basement. The handle was unusually cold and the door was locked. Frustrated and defeated, I slumped in the couch in depression. That is, until I realized that there was a specific flower pot that my wife always guarded with her life. On a hunch, I went to it and found the key at the bottom of the pot, under the dirt. As soon as I opened the door, the rancid, intangible odor attacked me like a falling wall from a decrepit building. The entire basement looked as if it was wasting away, in clear contrast to the rest of the house. Heavy layers of dust upon every surface suggested that the basement hadn't been accessed in years. Using my cell phone as a flashlight, I guided myself downstairs and flicked a light switch. Surprisingly, the bulb still worked. Okay, I think that's okay. See, should I read a little bit further? And with this particular criticism I have, I don't think they did a very good job setting up the basement. And it kind of goes without saying, like, we have one paragraph is set up to lead into this stupid, like, earth-shattering realization. To me, I think it would have made more sense for us to set up that he had a laptop that he used to use, that he had on his person, that yeah, that he had still had like boatloads of porn because he set up that he was a porn addict, right? So what you do is that you set up that he has a laptop that was put in the basement, and okay, I'll get more into this as we go on because this is something that cause the revelation that comes up next, I think, kind of leads into the criticism that I'm putting forth now. The walls looked molded, and the wood was breaking down. The stench was putrid, and the entire place was in disarray. I encountered a strong sense of dysphoria after setting my foot in the room, so I quickly searched for some old computer with the intent of running upstairs as quickly as possible. To my luck and astonishment, there was an old laptop and a charger in the corner, hidden under some boxes and books. Oddly enough, one of those boxes, was in one in which she brought down after I had first moved in. I had not seen some of this stuff in a long time. Ignoring the nostalgia, I seized the computer and charger and raced upstairs to the master bedroom. After giving the laptop a few minutes of power, I booted it up. It ran Windows XP and was quite the technological dinosaur compared to the modern equipment. But it had Microsoft Office, so it was acceptable. As soon as Windows finished booting up, I saw a system message appear on the screen notifying me that the news source had been added to the tag's video cache, or cache, however you pronounce it, and if I would like to check it. I never seen a system message like this before, so I know snooping around is generally taboo, but curiosity overcame me. Two cliches that I can't stand: the magical fucking super magic that can like override technology and like make systems do things that they normally can't ever do, and the fucking curiosity overcame me line. You could probably find. You can probably find that in like 80% of like horror fiction, in some variation where it's like someone was going to do something that made sense, but curiosity overcame them and they did the idiotic thing. But it still like makes you roll your eyes every time that you fucking see it in any fiction, especially when it's like verbatim, the line verbatim. I was taken to a hidden file that required a password to access it. Rolling my eyes, I moved the cursor to the access program when suddenly something typed the password in for me. Again, spooky magic pewter powers. A bit frightened at this point, I was sucked into the screen. Oh, sexy. Um, there were four videos entitled Him.avi, 1.avi, 2.avi, and Y.avi. All four thumbnails were pure black. Curious, I clicked on the file entitled Him.avi. I shouldn't have done that. Where is it? There we go. I was taken to a file that. No, wait, where is it? The video was extremely shaky and grainy. I could barely make out the figure of a man tied to a chair with some sort of metallic rope. A woman moving as if she was floating in air, not moving a single bone in her body, but yet being able to slowly hover around the room, came into the picture. To my horror, she brought out a knife and started slowly cutting the man. The man screamed in brutal pain as the woman slowly cut him to pieces. Blood poured from his mouth, and all his lacerations as the woman dug the knife deeper. His clothing was thoroughly stripped from his body, and after each article was removed, she placed a lighter to it. She used a lighter to set all of his newly exposed hairs on fire. Covered in horrific burns and terrifying cuts, the man stopped screaming and now simply was bawling. He occasionally screamed out, "Why?" But for all that he could muster. Each time he did, the woman stabbed him again. She began laughing as the man began vomiting blood and entrails. She then picked up a small piece of the vomit with the knife and slowly licked the knife clean. That's very unhygienic. Giggling like a schoolgirl. She then proceeded to gouge the man's left eye out while he was still alive. I couldn't watch anymore. Did I click that stupid fucking thing that is not for children? 'Cause I don't want to. I want YouTube sitting there fucking stupid wizard police ad for me again. Shaken and horrified, I clicked on 1.avi. I had to know what was going. Go to the police. Your wife is hiding snuff like, even if it's not your wife responsible for this, it's obviously her, but you still have evidence of like chicanery in your whole household, and the place smells like rats, so it's most likely that there's some dead bodies around there somewhere. So if I can go upstairs, dial 911, call the police, you know. This time, it was a young boy, about 8 years old, bound to a chair. He looked confused and innocent. I shook my head and fell into tears. Such a thing was not about to befall this boy. Oh, it wasn't about to. Okay, that's well. What you said about it's fine. You said it yourself. Nothing was going to happen to him. The video was the same quality as the last one. However, the background was much brighter. They seemed to be abandoned household. By the way, I'm going to be reading all this. I know the Bad Creepypasta crew and myself typically. Yeah, I think back even with the overanalyst, we skimmed over a lot of this because it was like unnecessary torture porn. But I want to read it out in its entirety to show kind of how silly all it all is to me. The video was the same quality as the last one, however, the background was much brighter. They seemed to be in an abandoned household, falling apart and in ruin. The woman floated over to the boy, much like she did in the last video, kissed him gently on the cheek. It's like heat lamps. A source of brightness is before over the boy one by one, until the entire video was white. After a while, the camera was dimmed so the boy could be seen again. Uh, The innocent look at the beginning of the video turned to one of excruciating pain. The heat lamps slowly began burning his clothes and skin, bubbles and blisters rapidly forming on the skin as he screamed in pain. As with the last video, he screamed "Why?" and was punished each time by being brutally lashed with a studded belt with a piece of what appeared to be broken glass. The blisters began to boil as the child was roasted alive. Eventually, the screaming stopped, and the boy fell into seizures. At this point, the same giggling could be heard the same over and over again, and this time even louder. She took out a knife and cut "I deserve it" to the child's melting torso as he screamed. Eventually, the boy stopped moving, and that closed the video at this point. See, my outrage, I guess, over the years has been diminished to such an extent that I'm reading this all, and it feels more like a chore than. I guess it's supposed to be horrific. It's just over the top and stupid to me. Like, what is this really in service of? Again, like, I'll reserve a lot of my criticism after I'm done reading all this bullshit. I needed to see the next one. I had to witness it. No, you don't. You can just call the police and like them take care of it. You don't need to watch the videos. You can probably have them just give you a vague and a very brief description of what was in the video if they allow that. This had to be stopped with such a determination. I clicked determination to watch snuff. What the fuck is wrong with you? Yeah, it takes a lot of bravery to fucking watch snuff films instead of calling the police. Okay, this one there was no one strapped to a chair. Instead, an infant car seat was in the chair. What seemed to be a newborn infant tightly strapped inside. Like the previous videos, the woman floated over to the child. She rubbed his hair and briefly went off to the camera. She came back with a syringe, which violently struck it into the child's body, injecting a blue liquid into the child. Unique to the collection, the video began fast forwarding, and at first the child seemed normal, happy, smiling, carefree after having a giant needle jammed into its body, as all infants do. Babies like syringes. They love it. They love giant fucking needles getting violently jammed into their body. In fact, that's one of their favorite pastimes as infants. I remember as a baby, I used to get like giant fucking barbell like size needles jammed directly into my eye. It was just another thing to do, another way to pass the time. We're Rugrats. You ever seen the Rugrats movie? Oh, Rugrats is bearing in mind everything I just said. Rugrats is going to be a lot less positive to watch, isn't it? Fast forwarding process began. As I'm gonna see, the fast forwarding progressed. The child began more and more uncomfortable. He started coughing up and wheezing. He began puking, white liquid, and began crying, almost at two, saying "Why?" The dark bottle was placed in front of the camera with the words "Tasty Juice" written on it. The bottle was turned over to reveal its contents. A blue liquid sizzled when it touched the ground. Blood-curdling screams erupted from the baby as it fell into an unstable condition. As the shrieking cloud grew closer and closer to death. The same giggling from the previous video presented itself, but this time it was far louder than before. Determined to make it to the end, I fixated my eyes to the screen despite how much they were tugging at me to look away. Uh, the woman was screaming in laughter and louder than the baby at this point. She floated over to the child again, unstrapped it, grabbed it by a leg, and to my utter shock, swung it head first as hard as she could into the wall. The child's head exploded on impact, leaving cranial viscera and fluid draped over the wall. The video then went to black. I don't know, it just reminded me of fucking Caligula. Anyone ever seen Caligula? Anyone? It's not a movie to watch if you don't got a stomach for it. I'm just saying that right now. Shaking, I forced myself to click back on y.avi. Before the video played, I noticed that the file was modified within the last hour. Almost blinded by fear, I swallowed my apprehension, opened my eyes. This time there was just a woman. There was no other person present. She was facing away from the camera and was speaking in a demonic tone. I can't recall exactly, but here's a paraphrased transcript of what she said. Hello. Clearly by now you know that I am not the person you thought I was. I am a sick, twisted woman. I love this. It makes me so happy to see somebody die, especially at my hand. I know you're watching this, and I know you're terrified. The ghosts of those I have killed are swarming around you right now, telling you to pull away from the screen and save yourself. Yet you still sit there and watch, waiting for some happy ending or reasonable explanation. As to the events that you have just witnessed, there are no special effects here. What you saw was real. I love watching this footage, even so, more so to pleasure myself to it. But I had to hide it. You couldn't know. Your lonely piece of shit brain would tell you to turn me in. Well, his lonely piece of shit brain told him that the smart thing to do was to keep watching videos for no reason, instead of going upstairs and doing the thing that that says something where even the fucking maniac fucking serial killer just assumed that you would do the smart thing instead of doing what you did. You were so desperate for love, you fell in love with a serial killer. The woman turned around and instantly I recognized the face of my wife. I couldn't even feel emotion at this point. I didn't know what to think. My memory had fallen into pieces. I didn't know where I was, or who I had been, or what I was about to go through. Everything in my life died as I saw the once happy and bubbly eyes that I once saw in my wife become vapid and emotionless. My smile crept across her face, one that made me quiver and Malise? Molasses? I can't read that. The slightest thought of it. It wasn't possession. It wasn't mental illness. It was just evil. So evil. The video continued, though. I love that. The video continued anyway. It's quite a shame. I really loved you. We had this passion. Hee hee. Remember the giggle? I knew you would find out. I couldn't keep the secret forever. Eventually you'd find the key to the apartment. Eventually the stench would become too strong. Eventually the decaying foundation would begin to topple the house. And eventually you'd realize that my children never had leukemia. And that my husband never left. I killed them. And they're closer than you think. Why do you think the basement smells so bad? You'd be surprised how easy it is to cement human remains in the floor. You just stepped on my dead children and husband. Feel proud of yourself? I know you're watching this. I just made this video. I know what you've done. I began shaking my head, fearing what I was about to hear. A cold sweat crept upon me as I suddenly felt two eyes bore into the back of my head. Those noises you were hearing aren't the pipes. Turn around. I slowly turned and froze as I met the psychotic eyes of my wife. She began to giggle. Okay, I'm gonna start my criticism that I kind of alluded to here. I think because I've made it clear in the past that I think that at least as far as my tastes go, that the more grounded a story is to some sense of reality, the more it resonates with the reader. Now, you can deviate from that when it comes to stuff like, I guess, existential horror or conceptual horror, where it's like, people with kind of like weird, obscure fears. Like, you can be as over the top as you want to those people and appeal to that. But those people are kind of few and far between the grand, in the I keep saying the grand scheme of things, but um, I I think a better setup for this would have to have been okay. Here's what you do. You can still have the over the top narration, and put more emphasis on the fact that this guy is a scumbag, because the direction that his life took, and like initially that I assumed that he was supposed to be a scumbag who kind of like has a victim complex and is like constantly like asserting his problems and like putting his problems over everyone else while being just a giant judgmental asshole. Uh, I assumed that that was like intentional because the way it's written, it kind of seems like it's intentional, and that feels like it was supposed to be a setup for him to essentially pay for his basically being the way he was. But that kind of is quashed by the progression that his character takes later on in the story, where he marries the girl of his dream, basically gets everything he ever wanted, gets the girl of his dreams, and like gets promoted, like lives in a nice big house and all this shit, and like seems to have evened out and like kind of gotten over his problems. What you should do, and it's kind of like how most like Tales from the Crypt best stories kind of go, where set him up as a and put emphasis on the fact that he's like a hypocritical, uh, whiny asshole, and the fact that he's like I respect women and shit like that, while like making all those comments like, oh, I was staring down at her tops, man, she had some nice tits, I felt my dick getting hard and all that shit, and you put emphasis on that, and then he meets this girl of his dreams, and he's bewildered because she's beautiful, she's got all these talented, like basically she's everything that he ever wanted, and for some reason she sees something in him, and then you bring it to the attention the fact that she had like bad relationship in the past, maybe not that her parent like child dead of leukemia and husband left, that she had very bad relationships with men in the past, like horrible relationship, and she's desperately looking for someone who will take like treat her right, and she sees that in him for God knows what reason. And he questions it, but he's like, yeah, I guess I'm, because I'm the ultimate nice guy, so of course you would gravitate towards someone like me. And then they move in, and uh, he treats her poorly in the sense that he kind of like not lords over her, but expects her to do everything for him, and she seems to have absolutely no trouble doing any of it. Like, she doesn't complain, she smiles, she cooks, she cleans, while he does nothing all day. Basically, just stays in the house and just fucks around all day as much as he wants. And it's his perfect life, in his opinion. And one day, okay, like she one thing clear, you can set up right in advance that she does not want him going in the basement, and she moved his stuff into the basement so he didn't have to. Like even make it a joke where he was gonna start moving his stuff, but she did it all for him because she's like the perfect woman and she can do anything, and she moved all of his stuff to the basement. And at some point, like she, I don't know, set up something where he needed to, like he's doing something on the computer, it shuts down, and she's gonna go in the basement and fetch the new one for something like that. But then he realized, oh fuck, my old laptop is down there. Or maybe she has a job that requires her to be on computers, and she's calling in like, "Hey, I know you have you have one in the basement. I'm gonna come over there. I'm just wanting to know if it's okay, because the one I had shut down at work. I need to finish my work at home." And he's like, "Oh shit, that's the disgusting computer that I have all my porn on. If she finds it, she's gonna be pissed. Like all the shit that I have on there." Or better yet, like not even that setup. Like she goes to the basement, finds the laptop, sees that he's a disgusting pervert, and that kind of flips a switch on him. And then he comes back home where she's like, it's something that set up the fact that she's a psychotic. I'm trying to fit into the image where to the mindset where everything's going just fine, and somehow he fucks it up for himself, and that's when you find out that she's a psychotic who killed like her last few husbands and like had them buried in the basement, something like that, where yeah, we're glad to see that it happened to him, but it's also kind of like a horrifying situation, like to be like trapped alone with a crazy person, you know? Because this says up here, right, like mental illness, and I think that's, I assume that that is supposed to be in relation to her suffering from depression in the early stages, but it really isn't touched upon throughout this story, and it really is more told than anything else, because we're told that she has depression. It never resonates, it never shows, except for when she manically tells him to not go in the basement. But again, I kind of blustering all over myself. Let's at least finish this before we get into this and start reading comments. Um, I don't know what happened after that. I told the police that the people heard screams coming from my house during an attempted murder and called the police. I was told that the physicians that I was violated for the sharp end of a screwdriver, and she took a hot block of ice to my lap. She placed a hot block of ice on my lap. Uh, a block of hot ice, excuse me. I was tied to a chair, the same one as I've been using in the previous video, where it's videotape. All the videos are now in police custody, and I refuse to see mine. Oh, but seeing the fucking baby get murdered, that was all A-okay with you, huh? You fucking dick licker. Uh, my wife was given the death penalty. I was present at the execution. Her last words to me was that she would never leave me, that she would always know where I was, and she would never give up on my murder, and she would never let the job unfinished. She made sure to tell me that I would never see her again, and she would never send another minion to finish the job. She finished by telling me that I would never be safe, ever. It feels like the story is like rushing to its conclusion right now after all that mindless fucking just unnecessary detail about the gore. She survived the first 3 attempts at lethal injection, but died on the fourth. She was smiling. She giggled like a schoolgirl right before she died. And then, I don't know, that just reminds me of the fucking, what was it, the giggling nanny or something? What was it, the laughing nanny? That's the famous serial killer who would poison people to death. I've been through some extensive therapy. Years later, I've been able to overcome the horrific trauma that I saw and experienced. I still make 6 figures a year, and I have a good network of friends. My life has been incredible. I feel accomplished and successful, something that I never felt before. I'm now confident, so confident that I'm going to go on a date with a girl. She's cute too, with dark, long flowing hair and vibrant green eyes. Oh, that's supposed to allude to it's the minion that the lady talked about because she's got green eyes, like this lady right here. That said, where is it? Where is it? Right here. Oh, green eyes. Where was it? No, that was it. See, green, long flowing hair and green eyes. See, it's a callback. Yeah, this story is stupid. Um, okay, this person is okay, this is unnecessarily over the top. I wish this author ill, and I hope they're dead at this point. Fuck's sake, man, it's just a fucking story. Um, although I don't agree with this either. This is pretty brutal in places. Far the worst I've seen. Um, it's not the worst I've read. I wouldn't say that. And like I said, I think it has some potentials, some potentials, like 50 potentials approximately. No, I think it has some potential in a few areas, but the problem comes in the fact that the author doesn't seem to know what kind of tone that he or she, whoever, is trying to convey. This it initially starts out as kind of like a kind of goofy, over the top, uh, kind of like I said, dark, almost like dark comedy. It almost reads out like something that you would see in some of Slime Beast's kind of over the top, like, well, like I Hate You and shit like that, where um the narration does not match up to what's being said, and it is kind of like creating some kind of contrast that is comedic, but then you get to the needless torture porn, and it's a sharp juxtaposition from goofy, over the top, like dumb, humorous dialogue to this shit, and it doesn't fit. And it's not like it's like, I don't know, if this was set up in such a way, like, what's the story? What was that movie I saw? I think it was Summer of '84. It was it's a movie that was made by, I think, the same gentleman that made or same people that made It Follows, I believe. I could be wrong about that. I think it was a movie from 2014 or 16, and it's it's a movie that kind of presents itself as like a kind of like a classic, like 80s style cheesy horror thing, and I don't want to spoil how the ends, but the fact that I'm talking about it in such a way in reference to this story kind of gives you an indication of where. But I'm not going to get into the greater details. Um, it takes a very sharp turn later on in the movie, where it's been set up through until like the it's at a consistent tone, and then it takes a huge swerve in another direction. But the thing is, it was set up and it was consistent. It like kept at that tone throughout the entire movie until that point. And so that's why it hits you much more effectively when it takes that huge turn. Here is not the case. Like this setup, it kind of wavers a bit, but it's still maintaining the tone. And then the shift is supposed to be is supposed to be like a subversion of things too. Like I didn't feel this doesn't feel like it's a subversion of what I was expecting. It feels like this guy got bored writing a certain way and decided to up the ante like midway through. It doesn't feel like this was set up like I'm trying to think I've seen other works that have done the same thing where it's like silly over the top nonsense and then it takes a heavy shift and in a very dark direction. I remember there was a video game that did the exact same thing. Well, there are many video games that do the exact same thing. Like what was it? Something Mary or Dreaming Mary, I think it was called, where it's like cutesy, and then you get small little hints that something is a little bit off, like as you play along, and then it takes a huge turn in a very fucked up and dark direction. And I'm not suggesting that everything should be like demure at the start. I'm suggesting that maintain the silly tone of the beginning, where this guy is like kind of delusional about how his life is and how he is as a person. And oh no, my peppermint's melting my tea. I was going to oh well, whatever. Um, keep that in there and keep it consistent, and to, like don't have him suddenly shift characters in the second half of the story, because he goes from being like the biggest loser in the fucking universe who like whines and whinges and compares his tragedy, his quote unquote tragedies, to everyone else's. Like, oh well, I never got laid, and your sons are dead, and you're a meth whore. Well, that's almost as bad as what I've gone through. And then the next thing I know, he's like, "Oh, well, I'm a responsible adult, and I have a job, and I'm working at I'm a CEO of Burger King, and I rule all the universe, and I'm writing a financial report." Like it doesn't gel well, and it doesn't. And his death does not resonate with me. I guess the mentality is supposed to be that it's supposed to be more tragic because she kind of set him up, and then like he took a big after life, like his life was going nowhere, everything started looking up, and then it like came crashing down on him. But he was so unlikable, and his character after everything was going good for him didn't really improve. He just became bland for the little bit that he was espoused upon. And so it doesn't really hit me that, oh well shit, like this guy, this poor guy, he went through all this shit. But you know, enough of that. Let's read the comments. Let me see. Okay, a lot of people doing what I was doing before, so I'm getting a phone call, so I'm gonna have to end this up quick. I think you're okay, buddy. Apart, the baby absolutely disgusts me. How is this still in the wiki? Okay, this could have been better, and this could have been better. Man, I could have made this computer and I'm computer generated. Oh, Herobrine, I get it. Why so much gore? Creepypasta has evolved. We aren't in the days of Squidward suicide anymore. I would argue that Squidward suicide is better than this, because Squidward suicide tries to maintain a Squidward suicide tries to ground itself in some level of reality, save for the moment at the end where it's like, oh well, the tape was swapped in like less than a second before we like got into publication. Or to air. Squidward suicide, and the horror comes from the fact that someone had snuck a snuff film into the offices, and that is a horrifying prospect, and that actually works. But here it's just it doesn't mesh well. It doesn't work. Okay, if I had to give this a rating, I suppose I would give it a On potential alone, maybe a 3 out of 10. I can't say. I'll give it a 5 out of 10, if only because the beginning portion of it is actually. I mean it sincerely. I really do. I think the beginning portion of this story is genuinely entertaining. Now I don't know if that's what was intended. If they were really trying to entertain or try to horrify, but I can't say that it's absolute garbage when I actually got something positive out of it. This is a genuinely entertaining story, or at least the beginning is, and then it like goes off a cliff because the author, I guess, was watching Saw and it's like, I can do that, but even more gory, even though Saw really at the beginning wasn't all that gory. Um, I don't know. Anyone who writes a story like this, conceptual horror is more or horrific, unless you're like, I don't know, like a fucking the guy who did Old Boy, which case showing it actually is scary. Um, yeah, conceptual horror for the win. Go watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre and revel in the fact that despite being called Texas Chainsaw Massacre, almost no gore is in that movie. I mean, there's gore off screen. We don't need to see it because just the idea of someone getting cut apart with a chainsaw or being served to people is in and of itself horrifying. But that's all I have to say. So this has been Vince Tall saying out. Hope you guys had a good one. Hope your New Year's resolutions are coming true even now as we speak. And there's a lot of gloom and doom around the time of the new year, and I know a lot of people have stress, but just got to keep your chin up, keep your head high. It always has the potential to get better. So I hope you all have a good one. And kind of late on this, but have a happy new year.